in the JSON, I decided I needed to make what's called an attribute. These are all attributes, and then I just used basically strings where it made sense, and then a URI again where it made sense. If I was getting data that's coming in from that looks like a URL, I'm going to store it as a URL, and so on. If it looks like a number, I'm going to store it as a number. And that's it. I didn't do anything more than that. And actually, I didn't go much further than that, because eventually I know that I'm going to go through a data routine that looks like what's on the screen here. And I'm going to be going to the session. I'm going to go to this link eventually, right? I'm going to be going to one or more of the links, whether it's this one for to get the latest number, or this one where I would go through and get individual numbers. And each time I go to the link, it's gonna return something like this, right? So what I said was, okay, great. I know that my data store is going to do that. So I'm gonna say, okay, I'll pass it the URL. I'm gonna call this from somewhere else, right? I'll pass it the URL, and then I'll get the information, the data, and then I'll start playing around with the data. In here, I haven't set it yet, but basically I'm going to start unwrapping that. Like once I get the data in, I'll start unwrapping it and converting it into the core data. I'll create an object for you know what I'm saying? Like here I'm saying, if let comic equals, try to get it to create a comic info item using the JSON data that comes in. Okay? And that's pretty much it. And this is commented out because I didn't go, I thought about the logic, but I haven't gone through to make it real yet. Because again, I try to do that with so that it's going to be of some benefit, but to others. So so any questions on the ideas? The question you had was, is this like a helper method? And yeah, this is kind of like a helper method. Yeah. So that once we get this, this is a helper method, and once we get the, I just haven't tested it yet to sort of create create the set of core data. And then the cool thing is that once I do this, another helper method that I'm going to have to develop is one that checks and then sees if I already have, like, let's say I have, the first time I run this, my core data will be empty, but after that, the second time, I won't have to run it for every one of them. I'll just run it for the latest one. Do you see what I'm saying? Because well, that's another thing. So the question about how to deal with the favorites, that's a valid question. The way that I deal with the favorites in here is, I believe I created something already. If I haven't, I will create it at some point, which is just going to be another field that just says something like, it's going to be a Boolean field that says something like is favorite or something like that. And then I'll just set that value to yes or no, based on if the thing is a favorite. So for example, if I was going to do that right now, I just go here, I click the plus button, by the way, and I say new attribute. I just say is favorite, something like that, and then I just make it a Boolean, and I'm done. So now it'll do an is favorite thing will be showing up here, right here. That's it. It's not and then so within the app at some point I would be looping through the comics, and then, or if I have a table view or some kind of collection view loaded, I take the identifier, or well, let me think about that. I haven't thought about, what could be a good unique identifier, but actually, I don't actually need that. Once I create the comic book item, it'll make an internal identifier, and then all I really need to do, since I'm working with things on a table, is track the current item that I have. Because after I work with this, when I pull things from the core data and I load it in, let's say I loaded it in a table view, I'm actually going to be loading it in memory first into an array, and then having that, so I would have all the values in memory in sequence. And, I would just be looking at that index path row to access the right object at the right time. So then based on that, if somebody tap a button, I would just say, okay, the button, for the active item, and I toggle this is favorite thing to yes or no. Any other questions on that? So the question about, let me just restate just so I make sure I understand too. The question is, in order to use the core data, do you have to activate it with something like NS, like a call to some kind of NS managed object or something like that? No, I think right here, what you would mainly would be doing is there's a brief little, there's some kind of, I'm pretty sure there's some kind of tutorial on this, but let's say I was just going to open this up and just using just the compiler. The compiler should give us a little bit of information about like what this core data object can do. So I usually would do something like that, just look and see what's available on the comic. So if I have a comic item here that's going to get created for this core data item, there would usually be some kind of save option, or you'd probably call manage objects save. I actually save I copy all of this kind of information from one project to the next. I never try to memorize it, but if I wanted to quickly, I could either I probably would either look something up. Um, yes. So the question about whether, for the JSON parsing behavior and all of that stuff, yes, you can save it. What I tend to do is I save it into a single file, and then I just copy that file around. In this case, we're doing something that's kind of non-standard, so I had started to create a new file. So so here I would, just whenever you So whenever you have like a quick question and it's got, like pressing and taking more than a little bit of time, you can just quickly, kind of walk through with the sample code here for things that will tell you, this is going to go through how to, save the manage objects in Swift, for example. And then I can see right here, I was trying to recall what object we have to call save on. It's called manage object context. So, they usually, there's usually something like that in there. So on the manage object context, you just call save after you make some changes. So if you create a new core data. And then also there's not only that, but you can also, this is like from, this tells you how to build it up from scratch, but uh, but like so this will walk you through all the code. And remember that object that I told you about, that I said a single kind of class. Well, the object that I'm thinking about implementing is kind of just what this is. You should think about it the same way. It's like a data controller, something that controls all the aspects of your data. And here they give it to you. I mean, you don't have to even, they give it to you for free right here. Yeah, you could even, like, to some extent, you just have to understand some variances, like, you have to kind of read their directions if you were going to just copy their stuff. Because, like, in this example, they're copying a SQLite file, and you already have that. Like, all of this stuff is already being done for you. So, but this is a good way of seeing how to set it up. But even better than this as a resource, so this is good if you want to like get a really good foundation. You can just go over the core data programming guide, get a real good foundation for what you're looking at. And then after you do that, I recommend that I keep talking about libhunt and swift.libhunt. And the reason I talk about that is because they add a layer on top. And so, right, great. I'm glad to hear that you have that open right now. And so inside of core data, I believe there's a library called core store, which is it's something that if you add it to your project, you can lay over the top, and it may take away a lot of the plumbing that you would have to normally build. So I might give one of these a good look at it, especially one that is already working very well with Swift. Yes. So the question is, it's perfect that I've come to this place, but how do you use it? So they have some tutorials here that talk to you about how to use it, including how to do the setup and so on. But the way I would get started, and they give you this TLDR, too long didn't read or whatever. They tell you very quickly how to get going. So you just have to. That's why it's important to like go back to that core data programming, so you get the foundation. So when you see this Xcode model name, you understand what they're talking about. And migration chain, you understand that. You know what I'm saying? So they're showing, but this is a special use case, setting up something with like different migration support. You might not need that right now, but you would want to, I think, look at the big concepts. And then I think you would, after you look at the big concepts and see how things are laid out in this library, you might go and you say, okay, here, setting up. And this is, in fact, seems to be a one-liner. And usually one-liners are good, but you do need to know what they're doing. If you can't just like write the code or copy the code and not have a clue about what it's actually doing. So it's fairly important to do that. Anyway, and so they will, when you go to these sites like this one on GitHub, you'll want to look at how things are actually integrated and how they're actually used. And you will want to keep in mind that a lot of times these view controllers, it's not really the right place to put a data stack. You want to typically you would want to create a data controller, a separate data controller that only focuses on the data. And then you might, inside of your UI view controller, you might call out to your special data controller and say, okay, do something for me. But normally you wouldn't put this inside of a view controller. So so that's what I'm trying to say. When you're looking at different pieces of code, you have to be clearly thinking about, like, okay, a view controller's job is just to control the UI views on the screen. And so if that's true, then it's not the job of the view controller to control your data. So you have a data controller that does that. And then Now, if you need to communicate between the data controller and the view controller, then the view controller can do that. Okay, or you can add another controller in the middle to communicate. It's all like